Got my block painted, but now I want to take care of a couple things. I really wanted to do these before I took my block to the machine shop, but I didn't get it done, and so I've got to do it now. And the block still has to be final washed before I do assembly anyway. But you can see these oil holes have casting flash around the edge of them. If you reach down and feel down in here, you can feel the casting flash. And I want to take that out, open that up. Some people also open up a galley here to let oil drain out, but I'm not sure that I'm going to do that. I prefer the oil drain down the back of the block, and I don't mind there being a little more oil retained up here in this part of the block, since I'm going with a bigger oil pan, 2-quart more capacity. I also need to thread these 3 galley holes for plugs, and I need to relieve some of this for the timing chain. Okay, I got this cheap little camera off of Amazon. I don't remember exactly what it cost, but it was less than $20. I think maybe I had to download the software for it, that maybe didn't come with the software. But what I got this for was actually to look down in like spark plug holes and so on. Yesterday I cleaned that casting flash out of the lifter valley, and I've heard from some people that the oil galleys can have a significant amount of casting flash in them. And if that casting flash breaks off and goes through your oil pump, it can destroy your engine. This is a used engine, so the chances of that are probably pretty slim. But I've also heard that there can be a lot of wave in these oil galleys, and that running a drill bit down through them can straighten them out and help the oil to flow better. But I don't want to make any modifications I don't have to. Some of these modifications I'm finding out are specifically for guys that run the circle track or racing boats where they're running at wide open throttle all the time. I don't expect to be doing that. Maybe wide open throttle for, 10 to 15 second burst, but that's about all I'm expecting. But I want to look down inside these oil galleys and see what they actually look like. I've got it on my screen, I'm recording it, and I will mix some of this video in. First I'm going to go in the center oil galley. And I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to see. I'm going to try tilting the block to let some light in the bottom and see if that helps. It doesn't look like that changes much. So I'm just going to continue to feed this down in the center oil galley and see what I can see. It's kind of like looking down in a well. I'm not sure. I see little flakes of stuff falling. I have to assume that it's actually knocking some dirt and stuff off that is left clinging to the sides from the cleaning process. All right, there's my floor. Now we're seeing my floor. And I'm guessing that when I tilt this block up after I pull this out, I'll see some flakes of dirt there. But I'm not concerned about the flakes of dirt because I do have brushes and I will be scrubbing this block and scrubbing those oil galleys to get all that out. What I'm concerned about is any casting flash that might be better. I don't want to run a drill bit down through here if I don't have to. I do have long drill bits for this particular purpose, but the risk of breaking a drill bit, obviously I've got a lot of money invested in this block. I'd wanted to do this before I took it to the machine shop. After all the money I spent at the machine shop, I certainly don't want to run a drill bit down in here and maybe risk breaking it if I don't absolutely have to. Now I'm going down into the left-hand galley hole. This will be the passenger side. Definitely looks different from the main galley. Those look pretty uniform. Well, I don't doubt that the guys that say you should drill those out know what they're doing for wide open throttle. It would seem to me opening those holes up might not keep the appropriate pool of oil there. So I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to open those up. Instead, I'm just going to tap these 3 galley holes in the front for a 1/4 inch pipe plug. Then I'm going to chase all my holes on this end. Then I will chase the rest of the holes in the block and get it ready for final wash. Okay, now I'm going to tap these 3 oil galleys for a 1/4 inch pipe plug. They originally come with a press-in plug on this side. I don't understand that. The manufacturer puts a 1/4 inch pipe plug on the back side of the block, but this front side of the block had press-in plugs. So I'm going to tap it, put screw-in plugs there. The one thing I do have to be careful of is this center galley has a hole that runs through to your cam bearing, and I just want to make sure I don't get this plugged in too deep and block that hole and shut off oil to the cam bearing. I use a zip tie to test this. So what I will do is I will tap this hole and just a little bit, run the pipe plug in, then check with my zip tie to make sure I'm not in too far. I want to get this, the plug in flush, but I don't want to go in too far. I just barely want it to get down there flush. And yesterday and I've already ground this off so that my timing chain won't rub, and I certainly don't want the timing chain rubbing on my pipe plug either. Okay, I don't have a tap handle big enough for this 1/4 inch pipe plug. I guess I'm going to have to get one. So what I'm going to use is a socket here. What I've got is a 1/2 inch socket that fits nice and tight on that, and that's what I'm going to use to tap these holes. The center one is the one that's got the oil hole that comes down to my cam bearing. So I'm going to do that one first. That way I don't forget about it. And just get started here. Obviously, getting started straight. Put a little cutting oil on it. Sure that's not far enough, but I want to see just how much that has done so far. Just barely got started. Okay, now that I've got my 3 oil galleys tapped for plugs, I'm going to chase the threads on all the holes. I'm going to do the entire block, but I'm going to start, obviously there's a bunch of holes here. Now, before I painted, I did have bolts in these holes, so there shouldn't be much paint down in these threads. But I want to chase every hole all the way to the bottom, make sure they're clean of any rust or debris. And then after I do my final wash, I'll take an air hose and blow them all out and then spray them all with WD-40. I'm using a 1/4 20 and 3/8. I think 3/8 is 16 national course. Yes, 3/8 16. And these are thread chasers. These are not taps. I know there's a big controversy. Some guys say they always use taps. But unless you have a bottoming tap, you can't get all the way to the bottom of the hole. And the real controversy is guys say that if you use taps, it will actually cut extra material out and you'll end up with a loose hole, where a thread chaser will not remove material. It just kind of reforms the thread and cleans the thread, gets any rust or debris out. So anyway, I'm going to use the thread chasers because that's what I have. I do have taps, but there's no need to use them when I have thread chasers. And I'm going to do every one of these holes, do all the 3/8 first, and then I'll come back and do all the 1/4 inch holes. And I will put a little bit of tap magic on these every so often, just so there's some lubrication. If the holes are in good shape, you should really be able to run the chaser most of the way down with just your fingers. That hole obviously went all the way through to avoid, which is good to note, because whenever that happens, that's an indication that you want to use thread sealer on it. I know some of these holes, some of these actually go through to water jackets. These actually, I guess, go through to where these 2 holes go through to where the fuel pump would mount. So those would actually be potential oil leaks there. Now that hole I was able to screw this all the way in just using my fingers. But I need to remember that even if I don't have something bolted into this, be it an alternator, power steering pump, whatever, obviously I have to have bolts in these holes, and I need to have some thread sealer on them to keep from leaking oil. Okay, the last time I worked on this, I finished chasing threads, and I remembered that I watched a video that suggested you test fit your lifters before you do your final wash. And so I did that, and while they're tight, they go in and they turn, except for the front two cylinders. And on the front two cylinders, cylinders 1 and 2, I cannot get the lifter to even start in the lifter bore. Now I'm assuming that those, even though they don't appear, I sprayed it with PB Blaster and they feel better now than they did. Sat overnight with PB Blaster. But I'm going to hone those two bores, and then I'll probably hit the rest of them very quickly with the hone. And I'm going to also try to measure them. I need to verify what the clearance should be. The lifters are 0.842 inches, and I need to verify what those lifter bores should measure. Okay, I've got to tap and put a plug in here. This is called the hidden galley plug. It's on the oil filter side of the block. Basically, this passage goes all the way through to the top of the block, and there are two passages that come through from the oil filter. One goes right through here, and the other, there's a plug in it, but it's deeper. And that hidden galley plug has to sit in between these two passages, or you won't have any oil pressure. Some people don't take these out, but this one has been removed. You go through from the top with a rod and you knock the press plug out. I'm going to replace it by tapping this and putting a 1/4 inch pipe plug in there. I've measured, I know the distance. I have to be just right at 1 inch below the top of this to the top of the plug. That's about, actually it's 0.98 inches is what I measured and calculated. So I'm going to take my tap, start tapping this hole, then I'll test fit with my plug and measure, and keep going until I get the depth just exactly correct. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll put the plug in and I'll run a zip tie through both of these passages to make sure I'm not blocking either one of those passages, because the last thing I want after putting all this money into this block is to not have oil pressure and ruin it. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, here's my 1/4 inch pipe plug tap. It's a tapered tap, and I'm just going to use a ratchet and a socket to tap this hole. Okay, I've got my little cheap Amazon bore scope going here, and what I plan on doing is going down in this hole and looking where I put my pipe plug. You can see the pipe plug at the bottom, and what I want to see are the passages each side, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to see that really well or not. I'm going to try going in through this one passage where I was running the zip tie through. So this is the oil galley view. Going in this hole where the rear main bearing is. There's the top. Okay, going in this hole where the rear main bearing is. There is the top of the pipe plug that I put in. You can see it's below that oil passage. So now I'm going in from the top of the block down through what is actually a bolt hole for the intake that connects to that galley. You can see my plug all the way at the bottom there. What I'm hoping to see is the distance between that plug and the oil passage. Now you can see my plug there, and you can see the zip tie that comes in below it. So I know that plug is setting between those two oil passages. This is the lower one. And then when I run it through the upper one, I can run it all the way through. It comes out at my bearing, and obviously you don't see anything there. So I know that I've got that pipe plug in the right place. I will take it out. I will do my final wash. When I put that plug in for the final time, I will use Loctite on it, and we should be good to go.